So recently I did a continuing education training on suicide, and it reminded me how important it is for us to know and understand this whole topic so that we can be of help, because this is preventable. And the difficulty, especially in this culture, I don't know about others, is that people are very uncomfortable talking about it. And that is the worst response to have when somebody is thinking about suicide. That's the absolute worst thing you could do, is not talk about it. And so we really have to work to get comfortable with talking about it, because then it's preventable and we can help people. And it's so important. So I thought today to talk a little bit about how we would go about that, and to give some statistics. So the suicide statistics, first of all, it's the 10th leading cause of death in the U.S. This was a 2013, so it may be higher than that. But there's about 113 suicides a day. Males account for 78% of suicide deaths, and generally by firearms, 57%. Females, 35% by poisoning. So 3.9% of adults age 18 or older have had suicide thoughts in the past year. That is 9.3 million people. This is not an uncommon thing that happens in this to us, as humans. The good news is only 1.1% made a plan, because there's a difference between having suicidal thoughts and then making a plan. 800,000 suicides worldwide in 2012. 86% of suicides are below the age of 70. 8.5% of all deaths among ages 15 to 29 were by suicide. Recent research estimates that for every death by suicide, 147 people are exposed, 18 experience a major life disruption. And so what that means is over 750,000 loss survivors, people that are surviving the loss of somebody that suicided, experience major life disruption. So this is pretty pervasive, It's not so rare. There's this idea that suicides occur more frequently during the holiday season, and that's a long perpetuated myth. The Annenberg Public Policy Center has been tracking media reports on suicide since the year 2000, and a recent analysis found that 50% of articles written during 2009-2010 holiday season perpetuated this myth. So the CDC for Health Statistics reports that the suicide rate, in fact, is the lowest in December. The rate peaks in spring and fall, and this pattern hasn't changed in recent years. So a little bit about risk factors. So the risk factors for suicidal thought, or actually attempting, are current or past mood disorders, I would say, psychiatric disorders. So mood and anxiety mostly. Alcohol and substance use, abuse. History of prior suicidal behavior. Family history of suicide. Hospitalization. Chronic medical illnesses. Disorders of the central nervous system. Pain. History of or current abuse or neglect. And then access to firearms. So the precipitant for suicide often is stressors or triggering events that lead to humiliation, shame, despair, often includes loss. So it's kind of like whatever the stressors are seem bigger than the ability to manage them. And so some of the precipitants often, what I think of them is kind of our life changes that can then bring suicide thinking kind of to the front would be transitions, so like to middle school, breakups of relationship, death of loved ones, military service, incarceration, pregnancy, menopause. These are many of the precipitants, but of course there's, a million of them. And so we all have some protective factors that we carry with us. So internally, it would be the ability to cope with stress, our religious beliefs, and our frustration tolerance. So how do we tolerate when things aren't going so well, our frustration tolerance. External, the supports would be social support, having a responsibility to others, so family, pets, partners, and then positive therapeutic relationships with counselors, etc. So a little bit about kind of the basic principles, what we can do when somebody that we know starts talking about or starts behaving in ways that we're thinking maybe they're starting to have suicidal thinking. And so, if someone, speaks out that they're threatening or thinking about hurting or killing themselves, if they're seeking access to firearms, pills, other means, if somebody is talking or writing about death, dying, or suicide, especially when these are a bit out of the ordinary. And then anybody that is exhibiting any of these following things, a lot of hopelessness starts coming up for them, a lot of anger, acting reckless or engaging in risky activities, feeling trapped, that there's no way out, increased alcohol or drug use, withdrawing from friends, family, society, and also with that, oftentimes what will come is that people start giving away things that are very meaningful and important to them. They give, here, take this, Anxiety, agitation, unable to sleep. If we have insomnia, then it's really much more difficult to manage our mind and our thoughts. Or the opposite, sleeping all the time, dramatic mood changes, talking like they really have no reason to live, no sense or purpose in life. And so again, suicide is preventable. Most suicidal individuals desperately want to live. They're just unable to see alternatives to their problems. So their focus is extremely narrow. We know about that in Buddhism. We talk about that all the time, how when our perspective gets very narrow when we're afflicted, so we're not thinking about the broader picture or, what options there are. And most suicidal individuals give definite warnings of their suicidal intentions. But oftentimes, we're either not aware of it or we block that because we're not comfortable. Talking about suicide does not cause somebody to suicide. Opposite happens. Opposite happens. If you feel like you can talk about what's going on internally, that starts to open up some options, open up your perspective. You have a connection, heart connection with another person. It doesn't all seem so hopeless and bleak then. So we cannot cause somebody to suicide by talking about it. That's another huge myth in this society. So what can we do to help? So we can get involved, become available, show interest. If we have this idea that maybe somebody is thinking in those ways, don't push that down. Don't ignore that thought. Step forward to the person and ask them, yeah? And so, we have to get comfortable asking the questions. So what are some of the ways to do that? So you could say sometimes when people feel sad, they think about suicide. Are you? There's one way to say it. Have you ever thought about killing yourself? Have you ever felt that you would be better off dead? Are you thinking about suicide now? When did you last think about suicide? And then if they say yes to any of those, then the next question is, have you thought about how you would try to end your life? Do you have a plan to end your life? What would you do? So if there's a yes to any of those, then we need to help that person get some help. And so there's many ways that we can help folks. Again, when we're talking to a person in this way, we want to be direct, talk openly and freely about suicide. So we have to practice that a bit from our own side so we can get comfortable with it. We need to be willing to listen. We need to be willing to hear perhaps the person say, yes, I am thinking about suicide. So we need to, kind of prepare ourselves for that might be what they're going to say. And that would be a really positive interaction then, because now someone else knows. So now somebody else can help. They're not all alone now. People that have help don't suicide. It's people that feel totally walled off, totally separate, totally alone, that then plan and carry out. So we want to really be non-judgmental, accept their feelings, whatever they are. Don't debate with them about whether suicide is right or wrong. Don't get moralistic about it. Don't lecture on the value of life. That's not helpful. And we don't really want to give them advice, and we don't want to ask why, because this encourages defensiveness. So we want to offer empathy. We don't want to act shocked, because that causes distance. So you can see how to do this properly, we have to get comfortable with it ourselves first. If I'm not comfortable with it, another person is going to pick that up. So I need to, be comfortable with it, to see that, and in a Buddhist perspective, we can think of this as kind of part of our bodhisattva practice. I want to help someone. So it's just a matter of getting skills, familiarize ourselves with it, and having it kind of clear in our mind how we want to help, what things that we can do. Don't be sworn to secrecy. Seek support. Offer hope that alternatives are available. And so the easiest thing to do is call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And that's kind of listed many places, but it's 1-800-273-TALK, T-A-L-K. 1-800-273-TALK, T-A-L-K. And you'll get a person on the line. Oftentimes I have done this. Somebody is suicidal. I say, gosh, I want you to get some help, because this is preventable, and there's, your mind can change. So let's talk to somebody that knows about this. So then I call this number and I say, I'm talking to my friend who is having some suicidal thoughts. Here's what she or he has told me so far, and I would like you to help this person. Would you be able to do that? And yes, of course, and on speakerphone usually I put it. And then I hand them the phone. And then somebody that knows how to deal with this talks. And so often what they do will do a further assessment to see, do they need help immediately? Do they need a referral to a counselor? Do they need to go to the emergency room? What kind of help do they need? Do they need to call their, their doctor? What kind of help do they need? What kind of plan do they have in mind? What are the, if somebody is talking about suicide and they just recently purchased a gun, that's serious business. So we want to, get that gun away from them, negotiate that with them. So, everybody has a different, what they come with, but mostly for people that aren't so trained in this, it's getting them plugged into somebody that knows how to deal with these things. That's the first thing. But I think, I guess my takeaway message from this talk today is how important it is to get familiar with this and to be able to ask the questions so that we don't abandon somebody in their hour of need. Just like I don't want to be abandoned in my hour of need, no one else does either. And we have the ability to reach out and to help. Yeah? Kind of the thing that brought me thinking about this to begin with is that, oftentimes I am not so thrilled with all of the media stuff with, electronics and all of that. But there is a application called the Virtual Hope Box, and I downloaded it on my little thing here, and it's so wonderful. Let me read where it came from. So the National Center for Telehealth and Technology designs, builds, tests, and evaluates available and emerging technology to deploy in support of psychological health and traumatic brain injury recovery in the military community. So this came from the military, but it's, anybody can use it. So it looks like this. So it's an application you put on your phone or you can put on a tablet. And it has 4 buttons. It has distract me, inspire me, relax me, and coping tools. And some are loaded and others you can create. And then there's a thing that's called remind me. So you can put visual reminders in there, pictures of your pet or your family or something that would give you a reason to want to live, so you can make it very personal. And so something like this is wonderful to use, I mean, I don't know about you, but this would be helpful for me. Would it be helpful for you? I mean, many of us could use some reminders about how to be inspired, how to relax, how to cope with things that happen. So there's a lot I guess my point is there's so many tools out there. We just have to get the information about them and just familiarize with this whole topic so that we can be of benefit to people. Because 9.3 million people have suicidal thinking in this country. That's a lot. Yeah. And maybe some of us in the room here, so that's a lot. So let's make the determination to start talking about this, to get the stigma of this in society cut, because it isn't helpful. It doesn't help us. Yeah.